You know him. He's our lead doc at Shoreline Perio Middletown. He has got a story that I know is going to blow you away. Only a few in this room know even a hint of it, but it wasn't until Dr. Dan Rolotti shared his entire story with me in preparation for this talk that I truly understood the depth of this human being. So without further ado, Dr. Dan Rolotti.
Oh, that's a good song. Check, check, check. Okay. My name is not Stephanie, the first of the three this morning, but I'm here to talk about attitude and how mindset can change mountains. And so attitude can really change everything, and I really firmly believe that. Earl Nightingale will say that attitude is a magic two-edged sword. It can either bring you the success we seek, or if misused, a life of disappointment. And when I talk about attitude, we want to think about attitude and mindset and how they go hand in hand. Attitude is really our learned response or choice response, so it leads to a behavior. And mindset's really how we just see that world. So I like to think about mindset as it's how we see the world, and attitude is how we react to that said world. All right. And so what we get here to look at, this is just a little picture of me doing some rock climbing, is that on July 8th of 2017, I took my family rock climbing for my 30th birthday. I had been really an avid rock climber at that point. My brothers were getting into it, and we went up to the Shawgook Mountains up in New Paltz, New York. Beautiful place if you haven't been, some great breweries as well. And we did some cragging, which we set up a few ropes, we lounged, set up some hammocks. We were doing some rock climbing, having a great day. We were cleaning up for the rest of the day to go home and get some barbecue. And so I went up with my brother. We set up a rappel line so I could get the gear off the top of the cliff. And there's a knot I've tied 10,000 times. I could do it behind my back. I could do it with my eyes closed. It's actually more difficult to tie incorrectly than correctly. But that day I made a human error. So I backed off the cliff and I jumped off and nothing caught. And so if you look to your right and you wink at your neighbor, it takes about 1.7 seconds. That's about how long it took me to fall 50 feet, land directly on my back. And it really changed. It just started a really dark period in my life for a few months, as you could imagine. I didn't die, which was incredible, but it was kind of tough. And so my 15 minutes of fame is that there's a really famous magazine and now online publication called Rock and Snow, and they featured me. If we could hit play here. This is not the fall. This is not me falling and severely injuring myself. Just so everybody knows, you don't have to look away. But it just shows you how quickly it changes. Gravity really doesn't mess around. This is in that same mountain range. This is me leading a pitch here called Gene, and my belayer, who is a rando. It was about 25 feet. So you can imagine double that length, but actually hitting the ground. It was just a bad day. So let's keep going. So how did we get there? How did I get to that point in my life? So this is me climbing Seneca Rocks, but I am a oldest of four boys. My parents are Venezuelan immigrants. Do not send me to wherever they're sending people right now. Sorry to bring politics, but just, I'm a legal citizen. I had always had passion working with my hands and helping others, and that led me to go to University of Alabama, Roll Tide. Graduated there and kind of changed my majors a few times. Ended up applying to dental school and going to the University of Pittsburgh, Hail Pitt. And pebble wrestling or rock climbing really became my passion during dental school. Probably should have been the teeth, it wasn't. And so I would travel with a group of buddies to West Virginia often. I would never drive because I was always hitting the books. Needless to say, I wasn't the best dental student. But I had a really good time. Did a general practice residency, and that slowed down the rock climbing for me, but I really immersed myself into that dental world. And so for those of you who don't know, Pittsburgh is a great, I call it a little town, but a little city, and it's right north of West Virginia, which has got some incredible areas for anything outdoors. Seneca Rocks and New River Gorge, highly suggest. They're paying me for this, FYI, sponsored. So life after GPR, I was a private practice associate. I was a CE junkie. I was taking CE for just about everything, really heavily focused more towards surgical as my GPR was. And I was still a weekend warrior. I had 2 climbing partners. We had some pretty epic goals set up climbing internationally. I met my future wife, Kirsten, and also started rock climbing, as you can see, as the ropes together. And I was in the early steps of practice ownership right outside Santa Fe. My goal was to get closer to the mountains. So then, like I said, July, I turned 30 years old. It hit me like a ton of bricks, right? Ton of bricks. It changed my life. And so what was my new reality? I, unlike Dr. Tobak's not broken family, I was actually broken, right? I broke 4 of my lumbar vertebrae. I broke all my sacrum, which apparently is very hard to do because they're fused. I had an open book pelvic fracture, and so you can see these beautiful 2 dental implants that we're used to seeing on radiographs are paced right through my sacrum. And then you can see what I like to call nicely my towel rack, which was actually like an external fixator that my brothers used to put little towels on because they thought it was hilarious. And so it changed everything for me, right? My doctors would say, you might not be able to walk again. You're probably going to have to change your career path because you're not going to be able to sit again. You'll likely never be able to engage in athletics. Athletics is quotation marks. I wasn't really an athlete, but athletics. Turns out I didn't put on here disability insurance. Be careful what you tell those disability people because this wasn't covered under my disability. And so what did this all mean for me? It was a really dark time in my life where I said, I don't know what I'm going to do or where I'm going with this. So during this time, I had a lot of time to think. And so I like to think of our superpower as attitude. John Quick, who has a book called Learning, really likes to think of knowledge as our superpower. I like to say it's attitude, because attitude influences how you learn and what you do with knowledge. It's our attitude towards life that determines life's attitude towards us, and I hope to prove that to you in a little bit. I think we need to act, think, and feel and talk like the person we want to become. And as Nightingale will say, we become what we think about. And so I'm a little nerdy, as many of you who know me know. So I got some research to talk about this. So there's a mind and body connection, right? Becky Levy et al. At Yale shown correlations between mindsets and outcomes related to aging. So if you have a positive attitude or mindset towards your own health, you're going to live 7 years longer, likely. You're going to have less cardiovascular events. And this is after they account for socioeconomic status, your actual functional health, degrees of loneliness, age, as well as gender. So how we think about our own health may actually influence how we live. And so how does that happen? Is it a placebo, right? Placebo is a substance with no therapeutic effect, is used as a control in testing new drugs. That's what all the big drug companies do. It's well known in medicine that there's a placebo effect. Really, we take a sugar pill and it has the same effect as the pain pill. Even a step further is that if we see a doctor giving us this pain medication, we feel like it's stronger than if the same medication is delivered by an artificial intelligence or computer system. So is it the actual medication? Is it the sugar? I would say we say, no, it's not the sugar. So it must be something else. And I would argue it's the perception, the attitude, or the mindset we have towards that medication or the delivery system. So there's a really interesting experiment done at Yale called Mind Over Milkshakes by Crum. And they had 46 patients where they were measuring their ghrelin levels. Ghrelin is a hormone, the hunger hormone, or the peptide. So when we have high ghrelin, we're usually very hungry. If we have low ghrelin, we are not that hungry. So they had these 46 participants. They measured their ghrelin at a baseline. They called it an anticipatory phase and post-consumption. And during this anticipation phase, they went over some nutrition labels of what the milkshake they were going to eat. Some people got the Sensi shake. This is guilt-free satisfaction. So only 140 calories. It's like a wonderful little shake that you don't have to feel guilty about. The other participants got indulgence. It's a decadence you deserve. This is a packing 620 calorie milkshake. Interestingly, right, they both had it, and as you would expect, or how you would not expect, they had this, the The people who had the Sensi shake had a very much higher ghrelin level, so they weren't as satisfied. They were still hungry. People who had the Indolent shake were less hungry. The ghrelin levels were lower. Turns out, though, they all had the same milkshake, right? So they actually were measuring different physical hormones, peptides, body-producing peptides, even though they had the same exact milkshake. How does that happen? Like, what is our brain doing that's changing our body? Carol Dweck will talk about core attitudes and talk about fixed versus growth mindsets. I think, in this room we have somebody who is a beacon for a growth mindset, and he's standing over there in the corner, and you all know this, right? Like, he's always has a way of figuring out how to get to a problem. But when we think about this as a growth mindset, really loves to engage obstacles and problems. They think about the journey more than the finished product. Versus a fixed mindset is always thinking about, how I'm a fixed person. I believe smarts is what gets me here. And so they're less likely to try hard problems because it really is an obstacle to their own vision of themselves. Attitude is a learned response. It's a learned behavior. So 9 and 10-year-olds were given puzzles to complete. They were given an easy puzzle they could all complete, and then they were praised on whether they were smart or whether they're hardworking. So a fixed praise or a growth praise. When they were giving a second problem that was much more difficult, those that were given fixed praise, hey, you did a great job because you're so smart, they gave up faster, and they did not want to do another hard problem. Kids that were given the growth praise, where it said, hey, you tried really hard at this, you did a great job, they were more likely to spend longer trying to complete these problems, and they wanted to continue trying hard problems. And so I think it's really important to note here that these are young children, and this is a learned behavior. It's not that we're just born with this mentality. It's something we can all, learn ourselves. So circling back about what changed in my life with that horrific fall that I had. I had a pretty impactful mindset shift. First of all, I started really recognizing and having gratitude towards things around me that I necessarily didn't have before. First off, my family. I was living in my parents' dining room in a hospital chair. I was making no income. I was learning how to walk again, but I could have landed right over here and just never spoke to anyone again because I'd be gone. And so, the little things in life I think are so important. The first day I was able to take a step with a walker, I had gratitude for that. So I think it's just really important to have gratitude for things. And that's me right after surgery, and I was like, wow, so happy to be alive right now. Secondly is relearning how to do everything. My mindset went from, hey, you're good at this just because you're good at it, versus I can't do this, but I'm going to get to do this. I can't do this yet. And so this is me racing my grandmother with our walkers while I was learning how to walk. She beat me at this instance, but I got her number now. And then I really thought about the next frontier, right? What was I going to do? And part of me said I could go back to what I was doing, or I could really try to enhance my skill sets and try to prepare me for what if I'm not able to sit and clinically practice. And I decided to go back to specialize and get a master so I could at least do something teaching or something like that. So I got into the University of Connecticut Periodontics program, and then I met Dr. Toback, Greg, through a mutual friend, and joined the Resolute family. And so my ask for all of us is that choose a growth mindset. When we think about mindset and attitude, we can let it happen to us, or we can choose how we interact with that world. And I promise you, how you interact with it, your mindset with how you react with each other, your patients, your loved ones, is going to also influence how they interact with you in a physical and a non-physical way. Focus on the journey, not the results. We all are going to stumble. We're all going to make mistakes. I think we're going to hear more about this, but we want to focus on the journey and try to learn something from that journey, because I guarantee it's going to help you for the next step. Find one thing to be grateful for every day and say it out loud. I'm a big believer in now keeping a gratitude journal and just remembering the little things. That there's so many great things that happen every day that it's so easy to forget and kind of look at the down. And then adopt the attitude of who and where you want to be and use it now, right? If you act like the person you want to be or become, people are going to see that person and start reacting to you the way that you want to be, right? And so it's really important. You can't wait for other people to start responding to you, because they don't see you as that person until you act like that. So that's my big ask. just change your mindset. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Let's give it up for Dr. Rolotti.